with the trade deadline approaching in the next couple of days, there are going to be a lot of good trades, a lot of bad trades, a lot of questionable trades, and I think a lot of small trades that could help benefit a playoff team or get a team a draft pick that could help 2, 3, maybe even 4 years from now. And it happens all the time. Little trades become the biggest trades, and the biggest trades become the biggest question marks of the century. And Justin Simmons is one of those players that I think will be traded at the deadline, and I thought was going to get traded in the offseason after he was franchise tagged. And I think the Broncos can get a decent return for him. I do not think he will be signed to a long-term extension in the offseason. I think he will walk in free agency and go to a playoff contender. Obviously, he's voiced his opinion on social media about wanting to play for a contender, and obviously the Broncos have not become that. You can blame injuries, you can blame this, you can blame that, you can blame John Elway for not bringing enough talent to this team, but the Broncos aren't in a win now mentality. They have young players on the offensive side of the ball, young players on the defensive side of the ball, and a handful of veterans. Justin Simmons could be considered one of them, despite him only being in year 5. And Von Miller is obviously one of those guys that comes to mind when you talk about a veteran. So, what could the Broncos get in return for Justin Simmons, depending on where he goes? Obviously, the Cowboys could be a destination, and I'm not saying that just because I'm a Cowboys fan, but because the Cowboys need secondary help bad. The Saints can be an option. And I think the 49ers can be an option. The Houston Texans could be an option if they want to try to help rebound their season and maybe give the Broncos one of their defensive assets or maybe even their offensive assets, even though the Broncos really don't need a receiver with Cortland Sutton, BJ Hamler, and obviously Jerry Jeudy. But they do have some assets, but obviously the Texans will not want to give up picks. So if the Broncos want picks, then I don't think the Texans would be an option. But I do think that there are plenty of teams out there that could use him. Like I said, the Cowboys, Saints, 49ers. I think some underdog teams will go out and get him, like the Colts or maybe the Steelers, to give up just a little bit to add just that extra safety right next to Minkah Fitzpatrick, which can obviously make their defense better. But if they do acquire a safety like him next to Minkah Fitzpatrick, I think we can write them as the Super Bowl winners or the team to win the AFC. But if Justin Simmons is not traded, I do think he will walk, like I said earlier, and it's just going to matter of time, who pulls a trigger on him, because I do think he will be gone, and I think there's a very low chance that he will hit the market next season, because if he is traded, he will get a decent-sized contract for the foreseeable future. But I think the realistic team to go after him is probably the Colts. And if he goes somewhere else, then don't come at me saying I'm retarded. But I do think the Colts is a perfect example. Malik Hooker really hasn't lived up to expectations for being a first-round pick, and they kind of need that safety help. I think that is their biggest hole. Their defensive line is fantastic. Their corners are fantastic. Their linebackers are fantastic. And I think that one weak link that could really put them to the next level and hopefully, maybe even win their division, or if the Titans fall off the train tracks, maybe they can make that last wild card spot. But I do think a safety would help, and I think Justin Simmons fits that perfect role that Malik Hooker was supposed to play in that Colts defense. And obviously, there's a lot of guys to talk about at the trade market. I could talk about A.J. Green. I could talk about all of these players that are obviously on the trade block. But I wanted to talk about Justin Simmons because I think he is the first, for sure. Like, it's not a rumor. I think he is gone. And I will make videos on almost every trade if they're minor. I didn't make a trade on the Carlos Dunlap, and the only reason why I made a trade video on Everson Griffin is because this is mainly a Cowboys channel, and I'm a Cowboys fan. But in a big trade I will cover, I obviously covered the Quentin Williams video that blew up. I thank you guys for that. And a lot of people are going to be like, well, or I shouldn't say people, I say Broncos fans are going to come after me for this video, but I think every team or every fan of the NFL, except for Broncos fans, understand why Justin Simmons needs to be traded, why he would be traded, and how he's the only really good player on that Broncos defense right now. Bradley Chubb has been meh this season. Obviously, Von Miller hasn't even played with that Achilles injury. And obviously, A.J. Bouye has really, people oh, O.J. Bouye's on the Broncos? Yeah, because he really hasn't made an impact yet. So I think the Broncos should trade him, get some picks, maybe get a young player or a younger player than Justin Simmons. Since Justin Simmons is still very, very young, I think they should try to go that aspect and getting draft picks and just rebuild for the future. Obviously, their offense had hope after Drew Lock had a really good start to his career last year in those last couple of games of the season, but this year it really hasn't been what it was in 2019. But obviously they had the weapons in the two running backs, obviously Noah Fant and their three core receivers. So I think they need to upgrade that defense. And trading their best safety could be questioned about first, but adding draft picks to that would be highly beneficial. Not short term, but for the long term, Broncos fans, just accept the fact that your team sucks this year and you guys need to sell.